I'll try that one again. Merry Christmas. Okay, there we go. Just some of us are still coming off work and getting into the holidays. Is that right? Is that what's happening? Well, this morning I want to talk to you about, I think this is a very, we talk about Jesus around the time of Christmas. And I think I get a little bit worried when I go to the shops. I don't know how you feel about this, but this time of year, when instead of about this season being about Jesus, this season becomes about the material things. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that it's how early did we hear Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas? Like how early did you, was it October? It was probably November 1st. They finished their Halloween advertising and they went straight into Christmas. These guys are just commercial, marketing giants. They understand the seasons. But can I tell you, when it comes to this season in particular, whether you love Christmas, whether you hate Christmas, whether you think Christmas should be celebrated or shouldn't be celebrated, there's one thing for sure, is that people all around the world, their eyes are turning towards and focused towards one person. And what's his name? Jesus. And behind every gift and behind every tree and behind every other bit of that mystery, you have people coming together around Jesus. And I think that should be celebrated. And so today I want to talk about the value that Jesus puts on you. And the title of my message is called, What Are You Worth? What are you worth? Have you ever noticed that you can buy anything for a price? You ever seen those TV shows? They're the auction TV shows where they go into the, I don't know what it's called. Someone might be able to help me out, but they go into these old storage houses and they'll find someone who hasn't paid their bills and they'll go to auction on the storage house. Storage Wars, that's the one. That was just so I knew who watches it, okay? So Storage Wars. And they go in and these guys look at what's in this, they look at what's in the storage, shed, and they take an assessment. They think, well, okay, there might be something valuable in that, and there might be something valuable in that. And you get to see this picture. The worth of the shed is determined by how much someone's willing to pay for it based on what they think is in it. And so these Storage War guys, they take a bit of a risk, don't they? They go and they go, I think that in that box, there's a safe. There might be some cash in there. There might be nothing in there. And of course, they go and bid for it $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 sold to the man in the blue and white stripes on the front row. And of course, now it's Dad, it's you. And so they get this safe. They open it up and they get ready. They go to extravagant lengths, don't they, Leon? Sometimes they'll use dynamite on the safes, and other times they'll drill it out. But whatever means they're using, they get it open. And they sit there and the moment is revealed and they use every camera angle in the world. It's like watching a Bollywood film. And it goes in, and all of a sudden the door opens and what's in it? Nothing. And the guy's just wasted $5,000 on a metal safe. But the point is, up until that moment of realizing there was nothing in it, it was worth $5,000 and possibly much more than that because that's what he was willing to pay for it. That's what he was willing to pay for it. And on this Christmas Eve, I want to talk a little bit about value and I want to talk a little bit about worth because I think this is an area of Christians' lives that we need to reevaluate a little bit and look at how much God actually values you, how much worth he puts on you. In the current Torah portion, we've been exploring a man named Joseph, Jacob, his family. And a little bit of the history there is that Joseph, if you've been following along with this story, he was actually valued in quite low regard to his brothers. Joseph thought of himself with high worth. Remember Michelle's preaching last week. Joseph had a dream. God gave him this dream. In the dream, he saw his brothers all bowing down to him and his mother and his father. Now, that would be someone who thinks of themselves with relatively high worth, I imagine, if you saw your whole family bowing down to you. All of a sudden, the value that his brothers put on him is he ends up in slavery in Egypt. This is the value and worth that they have for him. They reduce it, they minimize his worth. And yet, while he was in slavery, while he was in Egypt, he lived excellently and with integrity. And you can see that worth is not something that's just determined by how much others are willing to put on you, but what you internally direct yourself. And so in verse 15 of the chapter, which I haven't actually written the chapter reference, I think we're in Genesis 39. Someone can correct me there. When Joseph, verse 15, I don't know, Dad, if you're able to just find that reference, I would hate to not have the reference for this one, but in this case, I've done it, folks. I've omitted my reference. Starts off when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead. Genesis, who's going to get it? Going once, twice. Genesis 50 verses 15. Here we go. When Joseph's brothers saw that, thank you for that, by the way. I appreciate that. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all of the evil that we did to him. So once again, they're casting their value, their low regard, their low thought on Joseph for all that we did to him. So they send a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say it to Joseph. Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. And when Joseph heard this, he wept. And when they spoke to him, his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide you for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph's value, Joseph's worth was derived by what God thought about him. Joseph's value and worth was defined by what the covenant said about him. And if you can imagine that sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, your own worth is either externally or internally or a combination of both determined. So internally, Joseph had no problem understanding his worth and value. He knew that there was a covenant. He knew that he was right before God. And so his worth and his integrity acted as one. Now we get to the external part. Now, Albert Einstein says this. He says, try not to become a person of success, but rather become a person of value. Have you ever known when you have coffee with someone or a meal with someone, they're either takers or they're givers? Have you noticed this? They either take. I'm looking at Dad because I'm probably the take when I have coffee with Dad. I always, Dad, now we need a solution on this, okay? And then I extract. But in every coffee, lunch, there are people who add value and people who take, right? Can I say that we need to be people who add value in every situation? This is not necessarily a Christian thing. This is just part about being a good and great person of the kingdom of God. I imagine if you sit with Jesus for a couple of seconds, he's going to look at how he can add value to your life. He's going to look at what he can do today or how he can help you. That's the kind of people we need to be. And then, of course, the real measure of one's wealth or one's worth would be how much are you worth if you lost all of your money? So if you lost all of your money and if you lost everything, how much are you worth? Do you feel like a complete and utter failure? Or is your worth not determined by finance or external things? So the first point for this morning is finding value in God's purchase. Come with me to 1 Corinthians 6 verses 20. 1 Corinthians 6 verses 20. It says this, for you were bought at a price. Say that part again with me. You were bought at a price. Therefore, now if you were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body, in your spirit, which are whose? Yours. Which are your friends? No, which are God's. This is not a transaction, a two-way transaction. You, when you came to faith and believed that Jesus was the Messiah who could grant you a resurrected state for eternity, you were purchased. You weren't bartered for. You weren't some kind of trade agreement. You were purchased for the full price. But now you're not your own, you're God's. God's love is a purchase, and our flaws and shortcomings don't diminish the value of that purchase. They emphasize the depth of God's great sacrifice. He sacrificed everything so that you could be purchased, so that I could be purchased. I'll give you an example. Value, when it's determined by the person who is paying, right? Let me say it this way. This ring that's on my finger, can you all see that one? This one here? Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Got the thumbs up. This ring was not the ring that I had purchased for my wedding day. On our wedding day, or just prior, I had purchased this beautiful tungsten ring. It was black. It was inlaid with some gold. The only problem, does anyone know tungsten, you can't resize it, hey? So there's no point buying a wedding ring that's a couple sizes too large because it becomes really worthless unless you decide at that point, day one of wedding, I'm going to start eating a lot of chocolate. Okay, so that's the only way it works. So I had the choice, what do I do with this ring? It was very expensive. It was the one I wanted, and now I gave it away to a friend. Why? Why did I give it away? Why didn't I sell it? It had lost its worth to me. I went onto eBay. Don't laugh at me about this. I purchased Tasha's ring. I sold my motorbike to make that transaction happen. It was I don't regret it at all. No. And that left us with about $20 in the bank account. And I bought this on eBay for $8. Now, I remember thinking before we got married, I'll spend the $8, and then after a couple of months when we've got some money, I'll just, I'll buy another one. But can I tell you that this wedding ring here, has more value to me than anything in the world other than the physical representation of my wife. You couldn't ask me to give this away. You couldn't tell me, here's $1,000, $2,000, $1 million, I will trade you for this. Why? Because the value has been determined by me, who was the purchaser, and this item now has incredible value. And you'll say to me, but hang on, it's only stainless steel. And I'll say, but it's not its material that matters. It's what it represents. And I look out here and I see a lot of stainless steel, possibly $8 eBay rings. No, that's not you. But I see a lot of us and I think, how do you think about yourself? You look at the material, the skin, what you wear, what am I worth? And I want to tell you that Jesus, when he purchased you, he paid the same price, flat rate for every single one of you. Not mattering whether you were a diamond, not mattering whether you were granite, not mattering whether you were clay or gold or what kind of material you are, he paid for you with the full price. So your value is determined by the price that Jesus was willing to pay. And that's immeasurable. That is absolutely immeasurable. He purchased you with a price, it wasn't low, and sometimes we might think of ourselves as low value items, but I'm telling you, you are not a low value item. You cannot be bought for another price. You've already been purchased. So we need to recognize our worth, folks. Sometimes I know this is a very simple message at the moment, but you and I need to recognize our worth. Jesus has paid. It's not determined by worldly measures. It's not determined by anything else. Jesus has paid. But second, 1 Corinthians 6 says, now live as such in a way that glorifies God. So now that you've been purchased, step one, you've believed, you have faith, now live to glorify him, live in a way. The second point today is my value is in the right place. Now, Mark 6 verses 1 to 6. We're talking about Jesus here. In Mark 6, it says, he went away from there and came to his hometown, which was Nazareth. And his disciples followed him, and on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him, and Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household. And he could do no mighty works there except that he laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about the villages teaching. So has anyone heard the saying that familiarity breeds contempt? This is exactly what was happening in Jesus' hometown. They knew him as the little carpenter's boy. They knew him as the little lad who grew up in the town. They knew him in a few different ways, his brothers and his sisters. But because of the familiarity can lead to a lack of respect. Have you ever noticed that? You can have people and become friends, and now all of a sudden, because of the close proximity of the friendship, there can be a lack of respect. And this was happening with Jesus in his hometown. Could you pass me a bottle of water, please, Teresa? Thank you. Do you mind checking? I'm doing an example and I just need the lid on it, if that's okay. Thank you. I should. Thank you. I'll drink one very shortly. This bottle of water, you buy these? How much is a single bottle of water? Do we go through that many? Wow. For the church. Okay, 50 cents for a bottle of water. So if you go to Coles and you buy that at 50 cents, Woolies, 50 cents for this bottle of water. Tash and I were on a cruise recently, and this same bottle of water with this same liquid fluid thing, right? It was about $6 for the bottle of water. Now, if you go to a plane, right? Now you're on a plane and you want the same bottle of water. Has anyone seen how much they're charging for water on a plane now? $10, and it's about half the size, right? So same water, different place. Same water, different place, and the worth of the water at the different place goes up. Sometimes your worth and sometimes your value, just like Jesus in Nazareth, sometimes your ability to do what God's called you to do, to find your value and your worth, is location dependent. Have you become too familiar where you are? Have people become too familiar with you? Have they lost respect for the worth that God has given you, and therefore now your message has become flat? What is your worth, and what's the location that you're at? Now, this could be a workplace, a university, it could be, but there's something for you and I to do, and it's to make sure that we don't lose the respect of our peers by becoming too familiar. You are a man or a woman of God, and there is required to be some kind of separation. It's not to say that friendship's bad, but there's required to be some level of separation so that you can function the way God has called you to function. What did Jesus do so very often? It says in many of the verses, and he drew away from the crowds so that he could go and pray. You and I need to become not so familiar that we can't take the time away and find our worth once again with the Father. Now I will drink the water. Thank you, Teresa. All right, final point. Everyone okay? Good? All right. The final point is that your value comes from uncompromised separation. And in Daniel 1 verses 8, this is a great example. Daniel in the scriptures we see, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in Babylon. And it says in Daniel 1 verses 8, Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now, for those of you wanting to know what the defiling was, we've got a very simple category of how this food could have been defiled. It could have been offered to idols, option one. What would be another option of how this food could be defiled? Unclean animals. Any others? Not kosher. And blood. Could be blood in it. Okay, so these are the ways. So Daniel has recognized this, that this is not according to God's standard. It's not according to the Torah. And so he's chosen to not defile himself and remain in an uncompromised separation. So true value is not comprised of conformity. Daniel's separation elevated his worth and emphasized his integrity. Now, the example I want to give you here is that there are two kinds of stones that are very precious, well, many kinds of stones that are precious. But back to the wedding ring example, can you imagine if on our wedding day I had sold my motorbike and I bought Tash this marvelous ring, but really on the day before I switched out that beautiful diamond ring, bought back my motorbike, got a copy of a cubic zirconia and put it on her finger. Now, do you think she would know? Leon, would she know? Beth would. Would she really know? Would she be that able to see that there was a difference? You wouldn't be able to tell, really. What would be required would be someone who's actually skilled at being able to see. And the difference between the two is that a diamond worth 1 carat is about 1,800 US at a minimum. A cubic zirconia at 1 carat is about $20. Both look the same. One's synthetic, one's fake, and one is real. Now, the difference between the two is that one under pressure will last, it's strong, and the other under pressure, it will crack and it will break. And the value of the diamond is in its uncompromised set-apartness. It is set apart. It's not like any other stones. And so in Matthew 13:24, it says this. It's Jesus speaking. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? In verse 28, he said to them, An enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them, being the weeds? But he said, No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow up together until the harvest. And at the harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first, bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Now, the point here to be made is that wheat and the tares look very similar. They grow in the same location. The ones who could recognize it were the workers of the fields, and the ones who recognize it are the angels who do the harvest at the end of time. Both look very similar on the outside. You and I might look like diamonds, but one of us is a cubic zirconia and the other of us is a diamond. The diamondness comes from our separation and desire to live set apart according to the word of God. Are you with me this morning? So are you the real thing, or are you as they say when I went to the Philippines, a quality fake? I said, what is this watch? She says, it's a real one. I said, a real what? A real fake. Okay. God has created each and every one of us so uniquely, folks. He's created you so uniquely, and he's given you a standard to be set apart from. He's created in you diamonds, but some of us are living to a lower standard of worth. Live with integrity. So where to from here? How do you determine your value? Let me read out what your value should not be determined by and what it should be determined by. And as we're going, if you recognize that you derive your value from some of these things, I want you to just hold on to it. This is going to be a platform for you to repent before the Lord and say, Lord, I'm sorry that I've derived my worth from these means. Your value is not determined by worldly standards. Your value is not determined by external achievements. Your value is not determined, your worth is not determined by society's recognition. Your value is not determined by the amount of Instagram likes, Facebook likes, TikTok whatevers. It's not. It's not by your social status. It's not by your material wealth. It's not by the opinions of others, whether that's a minority or a majority. It's not by performance metrics. It's not by temporary successes. It's not by comparisons with others. And it is definitely not to cultural norm conformity. What your value and worth is determined by is the fact that you are a child of God. You are created in God's own image. He's the true diamond. You are in his image. Redemption through Jesus, our Messiah. God's unconditional love. Your value is determined by eternal significance and eternal purpose. Your value is determined by divine purpose and calling. Your value is determined by the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Your value is determined by your relationship with God, your spiritual identity in Messiah, and the fact that God promises to be faithful to you. These are the things where your value is derived, not on the other things. Not on the other things. Worship team, you can come. You know, I often think around this time, especially Christmas, when people are in this process of giving gifts. And have you ever given a card, like a Hallmark card, and not known what to say in it? Have you ever done that? Maybe you're someone who writes cards with a little bit more vigor or meaning in it. But I know sometimes when you've got a card, you think, what would I say in that card? How do I, and not because you don't want to say something good, but how do you put into words the very worth of someone in a very short space? And I think that Jesus puts that worth onto us when it says in John 3:16 that for God so loved the world. This is like the Hallmark card for you and I. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Today, as we come to a close and we get ready for this Christmas season, don't lose sight of the fact that this is all about Jesus. And that God sent his Son. The purpose of his Son on this earth was to purchase you. It was the gift of purchase that you have. Today, if you don't yet know Jesus, you haven't yet come to faith in Jesus, I want to give that opportunity to everyone right now. I just ask that everyone bows their heads and close their eyes. Just want to talk you through this very briefly. God's plan was always that you and I forever would be with him and without sin. When God created the world, he gave man and woman free will, and they chose in that free will to sin against God, leading this world to be in a perpetual state of disobedience and sin. You didn't get born holy. You got born into a world of sin. No one taught you how to sin. It just was part of the life around you. God's hope for mankind is an eternity with him without sin. And so he sent Jesus into this world as a baby. We're going to celebrate his birth tomorrow. But it wasn't about his birth. It was going to be about his death and resurrection, that he would die as a sinless man, making ransom and payment for all of the sins that you have ever committed and will ever commit. And his promise as he died, as he was on the cross, was that whosoever believes in me will not perish. If you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that he died for your sins, that he was unjustly murdered, and that he rose again. 3 days later, he rose again, folks. He was resurrected by the power of God. He defeated death. Whosoever believes on me shall not perish, but have everlasting life.